Today, you're going to become an expert in inflammation in less than 20 minutes. We're going to be covering different lifestyle factors which could raise or decrease your inflammation, and most importantly, all of the nutrients and foods that contribute to a higher or lower grade of inflammation in your body. All of the resources that I'm using are going to be linked down in the description box if you want to read something for yourself. Inflammation, although it has a very negative reputation, is not inherently bad. It is, in fact, a fundamental protective force in our body which initiates the healing processes in it. There are two different types of inflammation, acute and chronic, and it is very crucial to differentiate between them. Acute inflammation is obviously short-lived, and it is characterized by redness, swelling, pain, and it happens, for instance, when you cut yourself, that area of your skin would become flushed, it would become inflamed, and in the next couple of days the healing process is going to onset and you're going to be fine. Chronic inflammation, on the other hand, is a dysregulated immune response. It leads to cell damage and malfunction over longer periods of time. It could be months, it could be years, there is no deadline to this. The symptoms of it are pretty vague, and I believe this is why a lot of people believe that they are suffering from chronic inflammation, and they could be right, of course. It can manifest as constant fatigue, tiredness, joint pain, also mood disorders, irritability, higher grades of anxiety, also different types of digestive issues in both directions, both diarrhea and constipation. Those are symptoms that we all experience at least at one point in our lifetime. Chronic inflammation also accompanies a large number of non-communicable diseases. Those are diseases that you cannot get from talking to someone, if you're wondering. Here I'm referring to cardiovascular disease, aka the most common cause of deaths worldwide. Also obesity, although we don't treat obesity as a disease, it is indeed a medical condition, and one of its main characteristics is indeed chronic low-grade inflammation. This is because the higher amounts of adipose tissue that an obese person would have are an endocrine organ. This is not a static tissue. These cells, especially the ones in your visceral fat, that's the fat that's around your organs in the abdominal area, they become larger, reach hypertrophy, become oxygen depleted, there's not enough resources for them, they can't survive, and all of this contributes to a dysregulated system. A lot of these non-communicable diseases are a result of poor lifestyle choices over a very long period of time, and this is why now I'm going to list out all of the things that you can do to prevent this from happening. First of all, poor dietary habits are one of the primary drivers of chronic inflammation, and in the second portion of the video, I'm going to be discussing things that positively and negatively impact our inflammatory processes. Another way in which our diet affects inflammation is through the influence of the nutrients on our gut health. A very major role in our gut health is played by the gut lining. This is a barrier that protects our body, our system, from the pathogens. If this lining is not intact, then they would be free to enter our system and cause an inflammatory response. The second very big factor is a sedentary lifestyle. It has been associated time and time again in scientific research to a higher grade of inflammation in one's body. However, here it's also very important to mention that if one subjects themselves to over-exercising, this would also lead to a higher grade of inflammation in one's body constantly. So there needs to be a moderate, regular exercise regime, and this is also what appears to benefit people the most. The rest of the factors are not going to be a surprise to any of you. I'm talking about alcohol and smoking. Alcohol damages damages not only our brain cells, it also negatively influences our gut microbiome. Smoking does a different thing. It raises the oxidative stress in our body, which is very closely tied to inflammation, and here I'm referring to both cigarettes and vaping. Poor sleep and chronic stress are another two possible causes of chronic low-grade inflammation, and unfortunately you cannot always do something about this. Another thing that you would not be able to control is how often you get sick. Also, genetic predispositions. Some people could indeed have certain genes that make it more likely for them to suffer from autoinflammatory conditions such as psoriasis or rheumatoid arthritis. Those are autoinflammatory conditions, not autoimmune ones, and the difference is apparently in which part of the immune system is affected. Autoimmune conditions are connected to the adaptive immune system, and autoinflammatory conditions are related to the innate immune system. But if I decide to talk about this, I'm not going to fit into the timeline that I set for this video. You cannot so quickly also switch the place where you live. Environmental pollutants and toxins could also contribute to your inflammation. And the last one, which all of us will undergo, this is a natural process, is aging. As our body starts slowing down, so does our immune system. The process was called in research senescence, and as the immune system function declines, there is more damage being done to the mitochondria, which raises the amounts of oxidative stress in our body. That does not mean that when you're older you're going to be miserable and suffering from a chronic, highly inflamed state, but it gives you the idea that you should be more wary of all of the other lifestyle choices that you can do something about if you want to be feeling your best self. Now that we've covered all of this, let's talk about the nutrients and foods that negatively influence your inflammatory processes, because here we have a few controversial ones to discuss, so I want to get them out of the way. The first one, however, is not a part of those controversies, and those are added sugars. The term added sugars refers to any type of sugar that is supplemented, usually to a ultra-processed product, as an additive to increase the sweetness, obviously. Naturally occurring sugars found in fruit are not a part of this group, and the same outcomes have not been observed in scientific research for those. Added sugars contribute to a higher grade of inflammation through two different ways. The first one is kind of indirect. A higher consumption of added sugars would lead to a higher caloric intake and more fat accumulation, especially in the abdominal area. The second mechanism is more straightforward, and it is connected to the impact of added sugars on our gut health. The not so good bacteria in our gut really enjoys added sugars, and as you feed her more of those, it is going to grow and multiply. This, as you can imagine, would lead to gut dysbiosis and a decline in the thickness of the gut lining, and those two things have been associated time and time again with higher grade of inflammation. I don't know how many times I repeated higher grade of inflammation in this video. You're going to excuse me for the lack of synonyms and my not so impeccable English skills today. The second non-controversial nutrients in this section are trans fats. You might have heard about trans fats a few years ago when there was more research going into cardiovascular health and trans fats, and this is where they first got their very negative reputation. Trans fats are not occurring in large amounts in foods in their natural state. They are found in small concentrations in dairy products and meat from ruminant animals, but the main source of trans fats in our diets are ultra-processed foods that contain hydrogenated oils. Hydrogenated oils are plant oils that have undergone a process called hydrogenation, which is the addition of hydrogen under heat and pressure and the catalyst, and the point is to make the plant oil solid, increase the shelf life of the product. According to research, these types of fats are toxic to the cells in our body and contribute to the release of reactive oxygen species, which raise the oxidative stress and inflammation in our body. If you fry something at a very high heat, this is also in another way in which some trans fatty acids could be generated, but it is not going to be in any way in the same amounts as if you were to consume that through highly processed foods. Both of the things that I just explained are contained in pretty generous amounts in ultra-processed foods, so limiting your consumption of those would also eliminate the threat of added sugars and trans fats. Now let's move into what the internet believes is the primary driver of inflammation, aka seed oils and omega-6 fatty acids. For people to have such a strong opinion online on this, you would expect the evidence to be stronger, but I'm really going to disappoint you with this one. Omega-6 fatty acids, on paper, are converted to arachidonic acid in our body, which is the precursor for pro-inflammatory eicosanoids, just pro-inflammatory compounds, if you want. This all sounds very logical, and this is also the main argument behind the whole thing, but in fact, when you look at human data, it is not very convincing that the consumption of seed oils and the omega-6 fatty acids has a significant contribution to inflammation. In fact, during previous years, there has been a lot of positive research on those types of fatty acids, especially if they are consumed in the diet instead of sources of trans fatty acids. My take is, if you are not eating every single thing deep fried, this should not be a concern for you, and if you are doing that, there are other adjustments in your diet to make that do not include the substitution of seed oils with butter. And now that I said butter, people who have this argument about seed oils usually use butter or beef tallow instead, and this entire thing would send somebody 20 years ago into a coma because saturated fats used to be the public enemy. The research on them regarding inflammation is also pretty confusing, and there is not really a clear standpoint. It appears that some of the saturated fatty acids, the short chain ones, might have a positive impact on inflammation, while the long ones might promote the production of pro-inflammatory compounds. The thing is, different types of foods contain more than one single fatty acid in them, therefore you cannot eliminate the consumption of a singular, let's say, 16 carbon chain fatty acids, and you also cannot exclusively consume just this single 4 carbon fatty acids. For the sake of providing extra data, it was stated in one paper that these types of more beneficial saturated fats are contained in fish and also in dairy products, while the other not so good for us saturated fatty acids are present in higher amounts in red meat and processed meats. And if this science holds true, that would really be no good news to the new food pyramid published by the US government. Instead of worrying about with which specific type of fat are you supposed to, cook your steak or your vegetables, you might reconsider the thing that you're cooking in the first place. This is because there is one thing that has a much higher impact on your inflammatory response compared to the singular consumption of omega-6 alone, and this is the ratio of omega-3 fatty acids to omega-6 fatty acids. Omega-3 fats, which are found in smaller amounts in flaxseed and walnuts and in higher substantial amounts in fatty fishes such as salmon, those are the ones that have been proven time and time again to have a positive influence on inflammation. They undergo the same biochemical pathway, they use the same enzymes as the omega-6 fatty acids, but then they do not generate arachidonic acid. DHA and EPA are produced, which are involved in the generation of anti-inflammatory compounds. So the opposite process takes place. Because the same pathway is used, this would mean that any possible negative effect of the consumption of omega-6s would also be eliminated. My honest opinion is that increasing the consumption of omega-3 fatty acids in one's diet would have a much greater influence on your overall health than eliminating the omega-6 fatty acids from your diet, especially considering that most of us are not really ingesting the amounts of omega-3s that we should be. The other fats that have proven to be on the positive list of today's video are monounsaturated fatty acids, and they are found in very high amounts in olive oil and olives. There is really no controversy around those, and they are also a primary component of the Mediterranean diet, which is the most popular and most researched diet probably in nutrition, since it has been proven beneficial for the management of cardiovascular disease, of obesity, and it has also been tried for so many different conditions. Moving on to sources of carbohydrates, here we have dietary fiber, and this is no surprise since I already talked about gut health multiple times in today's video. It is important to consider here that fermentable fiber would be most beneficial in this specific case. If you've seen my previous video on the different types of fiber, you would know that not all of the fiber is the same, and it does not influence our gut microbiome in all cases. Sometimes it just stimulates our gut motility. Fermentable fiber can be used by the bacteria in our gut as a substrate, and they would then generate the so-called short-chain fatty acids. These fatty acids have been proven to lower the inflammation in our body. Although most food products that contain fiber do not contain one singular type of fiber, it is present in higher amounts in foods such as beans, legumes, also apples, etc. The last group, which is of very crucial importance for managing our oxidative stress and inflammation, are antioxidants, and you can guess what they do by the term that I just used. Oxidative stress and inflammation are in a vicious cycle together. Once reactive oxygen species are generated, then there is damage being done to the cells, which causes an inflammatory response. This inflammation helps generate more reactive oxygen species, which raises again the oxidative stress, and you can see how this propagates further. The antioxidative defense in our body has two warriors. Those are the antioxidative molecules, nutrients themselves, and also the antioxidative enzymes. When we're talking about the molecules, here we have polyphenols, which are found in plants. We have vitamin E, vitamin C, we have carotenoids. And when we're talking about the enzymes in our body, their function requires specific minerals such as selenium, zinc, etc. If you're interested, I started posting more on my other socials, and I'm including very often lists of foods that contain certain compounds, so you can follow me on there and stay up to date with visuals and graphics regarding these types of topics. Last but not least, let's pay our honors to the dietary patterns that have been researched for their positive influences on inflammation. Here we have three different diets. We have the Mediterranean diet that I already talked about. We have also the DASH diet. This is dietary approaches to stop hypertension, so high blood pressure. And we also have the brain diet, which was conducted to improve Alzheimer's disease and dementia. Those three have proven to be beneficial in this specific area, and they are also quite similar in terms of the foods and the servings of them that are included. All in all, if you're consuming primarily whole foods, plenty of vegetables with every meal, a lean protein, and maybe some whole grains next to that, then you should be good to go. I feel like a lot of the time people overcomplicate things, they hyperfixate on this specific nutrient that is the enemy and is the cause of all of your problems, when it is always the bigger picture that matters the most. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope that you enjoyed the contents of today's video. Let me know if you did, and also don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss anything new from me. Thank you again for sticking with me, and I'll see you in the next one.